Well, for me, I've always said this. I never really learned how to engineer till I tried to mix something. And you never really know how to mix something until you've actually engineered and tried to mix what you recorded. Engineers yourself. And back in the day, I mean, for all of us that started, using tape, not in the box or whatever, but working with a console and tape machines and everything, the production process was whatever you're working on, you didn't have enough tracks to leave everything out there. So you had to make decisions. You had to make decisions on your blends. You had to make decisions for your backgrounds, for the horn sections, for whatever. Because at the end of the day, if you were working in the 90s, you had 48 tracks to deal with, unless you're working with the digital machines, you're up to 96 or whatever. But the point is, there were a finite number of tracks, and you had to make choices, and you had to decide, this is going to be what we're using for our backgrounds. This is going to be our let's say horn section or strings or whatever. And these now become packages that are now on your tape, and then you're mixing that, right? Well, what happened is the technologies enabled people to have infinite amount of tracks. And when I get a session that's got like 350 tracks in there, I know someone hasn't made some choices, and someone hasn't, is basically leaving it up to someone else. But the problem with that is, before it gets to us, people have been working, like, okay, back in the day, if you were going to pull up the song on the console, you'd work with, everybody that's listened to the record along the way, from the producers, the artists, the record company. Every time the songs get pulled up to do a overdub, cut new guitars, cut up, whatever, they pull up the tapes, do a quick rough mix, 10 minutes, and then you do what you got to do, and someone would take home a board tape at the end of the day of the session of what was recorded, right? Nowadays, people save the session and open it up exactly where you left off. And when people are working with working with music, they save and they build these productions and these so-called rough mixes over so long a period that they're practically done at that point. And for you to come in and say, "Oh, screw that! I'm going to do my thing," even though when people tell you that, so don't worry, we don't really like it. Just do what you do. 95% of the time, people come back and say, "Yeah, that's cool, but on the demo we had this. The kick was like so and so and such and such." So they never really mean that. And what it all comes down to is the fact that the decisions that were made along the way to get to this point have been built over a number of weeks, months, whatever, depending on how long it is. And it's really hard. Demoitis kicks in. It's really hard for people to like let go of that, even though they tell you they want you to. But it's really, let's see what they come up with. And then it's cool. We like the way we had it better. So to not include production elements, like Manny was saying, certain things that you might have on a guitar or some sort of production treatment on vocals or strings or any instrument, whatever. And just give somebody a raw track is kind of stupid, because you're just basically saying, I'm not going to make any choices here, and everything the producer did, I don't really care. I'm just going to let you have a blank slate to everything. Let's just recreate everything that we did in the last 3 months. Good luck. And that never goes well, because that's not what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to take it from where they left off and see if you can go further. Otherwise, what's the point? But my point is that there's an element of engineering that's kind of been lost, because now people have unlimited amounts of tracks and plugins and stuff. When we were working on tape and mixing in a console in a room, you only had maybe 3 or 4 good 1176s. You may have had one Fairchild, or you may have had a limited number of whatever, and half of those pieces probably didn't work, and one of them may have had a ton of noise on it, so you couldn't use it anyway. Now you've got unlimited amounts of everything, and just people go apeshit with the stuff and just throw everything on everything. And, you end up with this circus that you're supposed to decipher. And, 9 times out of 10, I find, tracks come in and there's like every single slot for plugins filled up. And I usually can like get rid of 7 of them and end up with, with a better result with maybe 3. Like, and you look at what they're doing because you don't want to throw away things that are like meaningful, but you see some things being boosted at 2K and then the next plugin down the line is dropping at 2K, or you know what I mean? So there's a lot of redundancies and a lot of weird stuff that's happening that just when we see it, it's interesting because you get the bird's eye view of what happened in the whole thing and how it got there. And it's kind of funny to watch and to see what, you know, how much simpler things could have been when you end up with what you get. But the point of the whole thing is that there's a misstep, I think, because a lot of new engineers and producers that are young, you know, young people coming out today that have not had that experience of working on a medium that's got a limited amount of anything. You know, you've only got so many tracks, you only have this much gear in the room, and if you want to use more of it, you're gonna have to bounce some things, make some choices, and move on. When I used to work back in the day with Teddy Riley and with Babyface and all that, I remember, you know, Manny, you remember, mixing with Kenny was like, you'd get 2 reels of tape and maybe 36 tracks and everything's already like, you pull it up and it's like, holy shit, this sounds amazing, right? Now, you may have 300 tracks and you can't pull it up because it starts sounding like a disaster. And, you know, so there's an element of, I think that people have kind of lost and maybe never saw because they were never exposed to it. That's my rant.
Isn't there a creative element to that, in that when you're doing overdubs, you're playing to what is on the
Exactly.
file that you're listening to? So if there are that many choices, what are you playing to, rather than having something that's cohesive that you're playing to? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. A lot of those choices were made, and then everything that was built on that was based on those choices that were made. So now if you unravel that and give somebody a whole, you know, the way we used to work when you had limited tapes, you would cut your music. Let's say you do it on a 24 track. And then you'd bounce down the instrument group and make what's called a slave reel. And then you can now start cutting vocals, but you'd have like 8 tracks of just the music. So it'd be like kick, snare, bass, percussion, 2 tracks for keys, and maybe 2 tracks for another set of keys or guitars or strings, whatever, or a blend of those things. But on 8 tracks, you had the song. And then the rest of the tape, you can start cutting vocals. And then that would be our vocal slave. And then we would cut our vocals, comp things, fly things back, and then fly that back to another reel, which is now the second half of the, you know, 48 track, the second reel. And you can see now how many decisions have been made along the way, and you've only got 2 reels of tape to work with and maybe 30 something tracks. And this is how all those old records were made. And all these things were built on these choices that were done along the way. And now we kind of lost that because the ability to keep on going and, well, I don't know if we're going to use that, just keep it in there anyway, let's choose, you know, that whole thing. So, you know, that having that limited, the constraint of only being able to use so many things gives you, kind of points you in a better direction. And you also have a more focused plan of what the thing's supposed to be. Where, like Maureen said, if you start taking away things, like Manny said, if they start pulling plugins off because they don't want you to have what they did or their secrets, now all of a sudden the stuff that was recorded